welcome back to My Kitten Reads. I'm Eleanor and this is a somewhat delayed July reading wrap up. I did read 10 books in July, so I was really pleased with what I managed. This is delayed. I was planning to record it last Sunday, but then I woke up with a great deal of neck pain and didn't get out of bed for 2 days. So everything, and then it was a week, which culminated in snap lockdown in Canberra. So slightly delayed, but this is my July wrap up, and this is what I read. Most of it was electronic, basically, because I did a lot of audiobook reading and a lot of reading at the gym, basically. So what did I read in July? Well, I started the month by finishing off one of the audiobooks that I was listening to, which was The Book of Pride, edited by Mason Funk. So this is a collection of stories of witness accounts to America's LGBTQ plus history. So Mason Funk runs this project where he realized that a lot of the people who were part of that big 20th century move towards further equality are getting a little bit old, and so if those stories aren't recorded now, they won't be recorded at all. So these are just some of the stories, and there's a lot of stories even in just this book, and they had to really condense them down to fit them all in. But it's snapshots of little moments, big moments, all sorts of people. Some people, most of them are queer people, but there's a sprinkling also of like people who aren't queer but helped for like there was a lawyer who was looking for, he wanted to do some sort of human rights type case, and so he was seeking a case, and he won that case. So so that was really interesting. So very American, but still really, really interesting, and a wide range of stories. So that was a really good audiobook to listen to. It was like having little mini podcasts. Then I finished reading A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher, which is on the Lodestar Award shortlist. This was really fun. It's YA. It's essentially a story about a girl who, she's got magic, but she's got magic with baking. So she can make gingerbread men dance, and she accidentally created a slightly feral, sentient sourdough starter. And then she finds a body in the basement of her aunt's bakery. And things start to go haywire, and she ends up uncovering treason and having to hold off an invading army with giant gingerbread men and a very vicious, very angry sourdough starter. So, so it was quite funny, and according to the phrase, the battle can. So very entertaining, and I really, really enjoyed it. Then I read Uncanny Magazine issue 39, and this was one where I've got notes on nearly every story. I actually skipped the first story because it's an author that I no longer read for personal reasons. But then practically, like, this is one of the best issues I've read in a while, because practically every story, like, there was The Perils of Her Hologram Heart by Dominica Fediplace, I think that might be how you pronounce it, which was a short but kind of sweet look at immortality and nostalgia. So sort of set in the future, looking back at like the 90s and early 2000s, and how your view of that time changes as you get older and older and older and older. Then there was The Colours of the Immortal Palette by Carolyn M. Yoshim, which was about immortal artists from the 19th century in Paris. And it was about painting and how to put emotion and a bit of yourself in painting, but also how to learn to live your life the way you want to live it, rather than the way everyone expects you to live it, and rather than the way that you think you should to fight those expectations. So that was really interesting. The Book of the Kraken by Carrie Vaughan was lighthearted. It was about a naval ship in probably the 19th century, I think, that gets sort of hailed by a girl in her boat with her pet kraken, and the captain wants to capture the kraken. She wants information, And then so there's like this weird little encounter, and it's from the perspective of like one of the deckhands or whatever, who was like secretly like trying to make sure that the Kraken doesn't get captured. So that was fun. Where Oaken Hearts Do Gather by Sarah Pinsker. So this is a really awesome one where it's like an online group analysis of the lyrics of an old folk song, which ends up with a bit of a mystery attached to it, and a person who's disappeared, and trying to like, you know, identify where this came from and all that kind of stuff. And then the last story from this issue that I have notes about is They Shall Salt the Earth with Seeds by Elia Dawn Johnson, which was about a pair of sisters who go seeking an illegal abortion for one of them in a world where they're all controlled by these, how do you put it, like drone type invaders. And it's not really clear whether it's another country or from off planet, or, but you know, so they have to try and seek this abortion undercover and avoid the drones and all this kind of stuff. And it's basically, you know, as long as they've got each other, it's a bit of an as long as they've got each other, then they'll manage, they'll survive, they'll be okay. So that was really nice. And then there was some really great essays in this issue as well. Tansy Rayner Roberts wrote an essay about deadly frocks, particularly about the 19th century and the use of arsenic to get that perfect shade of green. And there was also a really interesting essay about rereading The Protector of the Small series by Tamora Pierce, not only as comfort during lockdown, but as encouragement and inspiration to at least, you know, to get, when you've been ill, to get back. You might not be able to do a great deal of exercise, you might not have a great deal of energy, but that little tiny bit every day, you know, but being kind to yourself as well. So that was a really cool essay. So then I read volume 1 of the Magnificent Ms. Marvel, which is the second run of Ms. Marvel comics by Saladin Ahmed, who took over after G. Willow Wilson left the comic she created. So I've been kind of putting off reading this new run, but I really enjoyed it. It involved Kamala Khan's parents discovering that she's Ms. Marvel, and them all accidentally going to like another planet or dimension or whatever, where she's this prophesized hero, and yeah, and things kind of not going particularly well. And at the end, I think they took the memories of her parents knowing about her being Ms. Marvel. So it was an interesting experience of family dynamics. Then I read Uncanny Magazine issue 40. Less notes on this one, but Unseelie Brothers Limited by Fran Wilde. I love Fran Wilde's short fiction, and this was a story of fae couturiers. So this fae dressmaker in New York, who they only pop up occasionally. So they're the rarest, most wanted kind of dresses. They're magical dresses, but they don't come every season. You never know when they're going to pop up. And so when they do, there's like a hunt with high society of who's going to get one of these dresses. But those dresses have consequences. Consequences that the purchaser may not realize. And so the main character is the daughter of a woman who once had one of these dresses, and her sister had one of these dresses, and her mother disappeared. And so she's kind of the poor cousin, and she's a frock designer herself, and so she ends up getting like an internship and ends up kind of taking over with the help of other assistants and stuff. But yeah, it's about the fae and consequences and really, really pretty frocks. Then there was 13 of the Secrets in My Purse by Rachel Swertsky, which was like a fun list style story with like a slightly sentient series of objects that kept appearing in a purse. And How the Girls Came Home by Eugenia Triantafello. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but this is a kind of #MeToo type story, but fantasy. And so it's about this girl who's got feet that shift into a different type of foot every day. So goat's feet or bear's feet or wolf's feet or whatever. And her father can't cope with the fact that she's different. And so her father keeps buying magical shoes from this guy to try and force her to have normal feet. And it never works. And what she ends up discovering is all the other girls who start disappearing are being taken by this like peddler and having bits of them harvested to make these shoes. And so she ends up going on a quest to try and rescue and reanimate these girls and tear down this guy who's harvesting women to make shoes to control another woman. If you know what I mean? But yeah, it's an interesting story. Then I finished another audiobook, which was Growing Up Aboriginal in Australia, edited by Anita Hess. And so this was, again, a collection of individual experiences by different people around Australia growing up Aboriginal and different time periods, in different situations. I found it very moving and very interesting and very reflective. Some of them are famous people, most of them are not. Yeah, but it was a very, very interesting set of experiences and perspectives. So I would thoroughly recommend it. So that was Growing Up Aboriginal in Australia, edited by Anita Hess. Then I had a little bit of a suite of new Pride and Prejudice variations. So Mr. Darcy and the Angel of Kent by Martin Honeycutt. This one was very madcap. It involved invading French, dukes and a duchess, and escapes from a besieged Rosings. So basically Elizabeth ends up going on, before she's ever met Darcy or anyone like that, ends up going as a sort of a companion to the Goldings as they go on this trip to Kent. And they meet Georgiana in Ramsgate, stop the thing with Wickham ever happening, meet up with Darcy, meet up with one of Darcy's connections who's a duke as well, and a duchess, and then suddenly the French are firing on this small Kentish town and they flee to Rosings, but the duchess dies and Lizzie's left to manage everything while Darcy goes to spy on the French, and there's sword fights, and it's completely madcap. A bit more madcap than I usually like my Pride and Prejudice variations, but it was fun. Then also there was a new Jan Roland, which was Among Intimate Acquaintances, in which Darcy never goes to Netherfield. And so Elizabeth and Darcy don't meet until after Bingley and Jane are married, and Lizzie is now living with Bingley and Jane, and they decide they don't want to live in Netherfield, so they come and visit Pemberley in order to search for a nearby estate that they might like to settle in. And so they meet each other, Darcy and Elizabeth meet each other in much better circumstances and with the chance to grow an intimate acquaintance, not like a physically intimate, but an emotionally intimate relationship, without all the various problems that the original novel put in their way. Then two more only. Then I read The Impossible Resurrection of Grief by Octavia Cade. So this is the book, the novella that I pre-ordered back in May, I think, by New Zealand author Octavia Cade, and I pre-ordered it because it was science fiction with Tasmanian tigers on the front cover. That was it. So I read it. It deals with very dark subject matter, but with a very light touch, so that it wasn't too dark for me to cope with. And you know me, I'm all about the fluff and happiness. So, but I would probably trigger warn for a few things: mental illness and suicide, ecological collapse, and a sort of description and dealing with the atrocities committed against Indigenous peoples, in particular in Tasmania and in New Zealand. But it was very interesting. I need to reread the ending because I'm not sure I grasped all the nuances, but I definitely recommend it, and it's going on my Hugo nomination list for next year. So definitely recommend The Impossible Resurrection of Grief by Octavia Cade. And then the last thing that I read was another audiobook, which was actually a reread of a book that I have in hard copy. Ta-da! The Fictional Woman by Tara Moss, which I read a few years back. and really enjoyed and sort of wanted to reread, and it's definitely worth it. Really good book. It's non-fiction. Most of my audiobooks this year have been non-fiction. And it's essentially, she uses her own life as a frame and as examples for the concepts around feminism that she's exploring. In particular, the idea that that society's perception of what a woman is fictional and is not actually the experience of real women. And so she explores it in a number of ways. There's a lot of talking about sexual violence, unfortunately, but so it goes through bits and pieces of her career as a model and the things that she experienced. And also it's sort of framed by her career as an author and this polygraph test that she took because a journalist asked her to. Because early on in her writing career, all the reviews were like, she's a model, she must have a ghostwriter, she can't write her own stuff. And so she took a polygraph test with a former police officer to prove that she writes her own novels. And she uses this as a framing device into this is, you know, what the real experience of women is compared to what the perception on society's perception of a woman is. So yeah, it's really a good book. I wouldn't say it's heavy feminist theory. Like, none of it really surprises me. None of the concepts do, but it's still a really interesting read and I thoroughly recommend it. And those were the 10 things that I read in July. I think 2 of them were authors of colour and at least one of them was LGBTQ, which is the things that I'm supposed to be reading. It's all getting a bit, yeah, I'm still not doing as well at those as I would like, and I've just hit another really difficult reading run because university and lockdown, which means no gym reading. But yes, that was my July wrap up. If you've read any of those books and you want to talk about them, comments down below. I'd really love to hear from you. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you all again really soon. Bye.